Matthew Stafford, 2 more touchdown passes, which puts him up into a tie with Jared Goff for fourth at most passing touchdowns by a Los Angeles Rams player in a season with 32. Welcome to Justice Stats, NFL Top 10's for Wednesday. We are looking at several things today. My name's Ernie Jennings, your host. And as I said, we'll be looking at a lot of things. We're going to be looking at some season leaders now for their teams. Players that have broken into the top 10 all-time in a season for their teams. Believe it or not, there's several players that have done that, despite the fact that there's still 5 games to go for several teams, 4 to 5 games, and they're already in the top 10. So that's going to be interesting. And next week, we're going to see a lot more of players breaking into the top 10, not just for their teams, but for the NFL all-time season leaders as well. So despite the fact that last week was kind of a down week, not kind of, it really was. It was probably one of the weakest weeks for big games coming out of a particular player. I mean, we barely had anybody over 300 yards, not too many receivers over 100 yards. We had a couple of rushers for 140 or 30 yards in that range, but nobody put up numbers that was good enough to match anything that had happened already this season as far as, good numbers. So it's kind of a slow week. I don't know if it's the weather, which could be definitely a factor, but something just wasn't the same. The matchups are getting a lot tighter, more important as far as playoff things go. And we'll look at that after we look at these season numbers. We'll look at the standings and the playoff scenarios, because it is getting very, very interesting as far as what the playoffs may look like. So with all that, let's get started with the games that we're referring to. And we'll start with, I went through the teams by division, just ran through them myself to see what players might be setting records. Now, some of these are negative. In fact, for the quarterbacks, it's not that great when it comes to the stats. So, for example, Drake Maye, quarterback for the New England Patriots, now is tied with Tom Brady for 10th, actually for 9th, with 40 sacks in a season. They're both at 40 sacks. Now, next up for Drake Maye is Tom Brady, who in 2001 was sacked 41 times. What a difference this makes. Tom Brady in 2013 was sacked 40 times. Didn't break his own record, which he had set in 2001 of 41. So big time span there that he was with the Patriots. And I know that the Patriots are hoping Drake Maye has the longevity that Tom Brady did for their team. Now, Tony Eason, who in 1984 set the record for the Patriots with 59 sacks. Drake Maye now has 40, still has 5 games to go. So he definitely has a shot, maybe, at breaking Tony Eason's record. Now, next up for the Indianapolis Colts, this is Jonathan Taylor, rushing yards. He got 85 yards last week, which was enough to put him up into 10th place all-time in a season for the Indianapolis Colts in rushing yards with 1,282 yards. And with any kind of decent game against the Jaguars this Sunday, I mean, right now he only needs 29 yards to catch Eric Dickerson for 9th and 37 yards to catch Marshall Faulk for 8th. So very likely he can move up a couple more spots this week. Now, he holds the team record, though, with 1,811 yards, which he did in 2011. He'll have to have some pretty big games to catch that number, but we'll see how he does. But right now, he's already, for the season, in the top 10 with that total of 1,282 yards. Now, also, though he did not get any touchdowns, this week. Jonathan Taylor is still third in top 10 for a season for the Indianapolis Colts in rushing touchdowns with 15. He's got the third spot. He holds the number one spot with 18. And like I said, probably a week or two ago, Lenny Moore is second with 16. He did that in 1964. So Jonathan Taylor just needs one touchdown to tie Lenny Moore and 3 to tie his own record. He's had a really good season despite slowing down in the last couple of weeks. But he still has had a really good season. Now, another one, Cam Ward, on the negative aspect. He was sacked 3 times in his last game, which was good enough to boost him all the way up into first place all time for the Tennessee Titans in a season as far as quarterbacks being sacked the most times. Cam Ward's been now sacked 48 times. He passed Ryan Tannehill, who in 2021 was sacked 47 times. Actually, Warren Moon as well in 1984 was sacked 47 times. But Cam Ward holds the record now with 48. And as I said, there's several weeks to go, so he's going to put some distance between himself and the second most times being sacked by a quarterback for the Tennessee Titans. That's the second quarterback. We got another one coming here right now in Justin Herbert. Now, Justin Herbert's been sacked 38 times, which ties him for 6th with Phillip Rivers all time for the Los Angeles Chargers as far as quarterbacks being sacked. 38 times for him. Not his most, though. Last year, in fact, Justin Herbert was sacked 41 times. So he tied his own record of 38, which he did in 2022. And now he's on his way to catch Dan Fouts, Phillip Rivers, who he's tied with, who did it in 2010, but also in 2015, Phillip Rivers was sacked 40 times. And Phillip Rivers holds the record with 49 sacks in 2012. So Justin Herbert needs 11 more times to be sacked to tie Phillip Rivers for the most times being sacked as a Charger. Now, when you think about this, is it Herbert or the offensive line? Or maybe a combination of both. But his offensive line has not looked good at all. And, obviously, I think that's what's going to hinder the Chargers, as they push for the playoffs. And we'll look at that because they're in the mix right now. But, man, they need to be able to protect him. And he's already banged up. His wrist, I guess, is broken. His left wrist, not his throwing arm. So, anything happens to him and their season's definitely over. But this is several years now. That's why it makes me wonder, are they trying to improve the line? Maybe they should improve the offensive line, or is he just holds the ball too long? It's something to have to watch. All right, next game. Now this is one of the bright stars, probably the only bright star for the Las Vegas Raiders, and that's Max Crosby. Max Crosby right now leads the NFL, but he also he's tied his own record for most tackles for loss in a season with 23. He set that record in 2023 when he tied Khalil Mack, who did it in 2015. They all have 23 tackles for loss, but Max Crosby still has several games to go, so he's going to break this record. He had 4 sacks in his last game. That's incredible. Not sacks. I'm talking about 4 tackles for loss he had. He's just been a monster for the Raiders. And like I said, really the only bright spot on defense. Their offense is pathetic. Ashton Genty, there's no line for the quarterback or the running backs to really do anything and be serious about really putting up an offensive show. It's just been terrible. But Max Crosby is standing out despite all of that. Now, another defensive player, Myles Garrett, who's running away with Defensive Player of the Year. He had 1 more sack. He's now got 19 sacks for the Cleveland Browns, which is he's already broke the record, but he's just extending out the record for most sacks in a season for a Cleveland Brown player. He passed Bill Glass, who did 1965. He had 16 and a half. He passed him 2 weeks ago. So Myles Garrett's just going to push this record way out. Now, he only needs a sack and a half to move into the top 10 in the NFL history for most sacks in a season. So I expect to see that maybe even this week. If not this week, definitely next week, because he's got about 1.5 sacks a game. That's the pace he's on right now. He's got a good chance. The record, I believe, is 23 sacks. So he needs 4 more sacks in 5 games to set the record. So it's a good possibility. He's got a good chance to do it. All right, back to the offense now. Rico Dowdle needed 58 yards in his last game to break into the top 10 all-time in Carolina Panthers history in rushing yards in a season, that is. And he did it, so he now has 925 rushing yards, which puts him at 10th spot for the Carolina Panthers. Next up for him is Jonathan Stewart, who has 989 yards. So he needs 70 yards in this game. Interestingly enough, you got 2 players here on the same team. Chuba Hubbard also on the team. And because he was hurt, that gave Rico Dowdle the opportunity to get more carries, even though last week they kind of split pretty evenly. But Chuba Hubbard last year had the 4th best rushing yards in a season by a Carolina Panther with almost 1,200. So interesting that you got both of them still on the same team. Usually you don't see that 2 players. I know it's different years, but it's usually you've gotten rid of one, or however it works. But yeah, you got Rico Dowdle and Chuba Hubbard both on this list. Now, DeAngelo Williams holds the record. I don't know that Rico Dowdle can get to it. 1,515 yards. DeAngelo Williams did that in 2008. There you go with the Carolina Panthers. What a season they're having. Man, beat the Rams last week. That was impressive. Just no one expected that, and they came through and did it. Now they got a break this week so they can get themselves ready for their next game. Now, for the Green Bay Packers, Josh Jacobs is tied for 8th spot for rushing touchdowns in a season by a Green Bay Packer with 11. So that's where he stands right now. I don't think he catches Jim Taylor, who's had this record since 1962, which is 63 years ago, of 19 rushing touchdowns in a season. He'd need 8 more, and he is definitely not on a pace for that. Aaron Jones is the next best with 16. There's a possibility that he gets there. Now, Josh Jacobs just last year had 15, which is good enough for 3rd spot. He might get there again and have a couple of seasons in a row with 15 rushing touchdowns. So he's really been a very consistent player when they get down near the end zone. All right, let's look at the Los Angeles Rams. Matthew Stafford, 2 more touchdown passes, which puts him up into a tie with Jared Goff for 4th and most passing touchdowns by a Los Angeles Rams player in a season with 32. Now, Matthew Stafford, and this is pretty interesting, holds the record. He set the record in 2021 of 41 passing touchdowns for the Rams. He also happens to hold the same record, different year, of course, of 41 passing touchdowns for the Lions. He did that when he was with the Lions. So he's got 2 years where he's had 41. He's got 32 already, and still several games to go. 9 more. He'd have to throw a couple of touchdowns a game, which he's on a pace, which he's been doing. So he has a chance to break the record, which Matthew Stafford and Kurt Warner both have 41. That is the record for the Rams. Warner did it in 1999. But he's really had quite a season. Now, another one who's benefiting from all those touchdown passes is Davante Adams. He had 2 more, jumped him from 6th place up to 3rd. He now has 14 receiving touchdowns, which puts him only behind Cooper Kupp with 16 and Elroy Hirsch, who holds the record. He set it in 1951 with 17. So Davante Adams needs 3 more to catch Elroy Hirsch. 1951. We're talking about 74 years ago. That is one of the oldest records as far as receiving records go. Usually you've pretty much seen every receiving record broken. But Davante Adams is making a concerted effort, and he's averaging better than a touchdown a game. So with 4 or 5 games to go, he has a good chance to break this record. So Davante Adams is third all-time right now for the Los Angeles Rams in receiving touchdowns for a season with 14. All right. Now, for the Seattle Seahawks, despite the fact that Jackson Smith-Njigba had his worst game of the season last week with only 2 catches for 23 yards, the 2 catches was good enough to get him into the top 10 for the Seattle Seahawks in a season as far as receptions go with 82. He's tied for 9th with Tyler Lockett. They both have 82. So he's got a good chance to move up this list. I mean, there's still several games to go. Jackson Smith-Njigba and Tyler Lockett, same 2 players, hold the record with 100 receptions in a single season. So he needs 18 more to catch him. And like I said, this was his worst game. He's been averaging way better than 2 catches, more like 6 catches a game, 6, 7. So he has a very good chance to get back on track. You know, pretty much every season a player has a game where they just don't perform for one reason or another. Now, in this game, the Seattle Seahawks, they crushed Minnesota Vikings. There was not even any point to throw the ball. They had basically beaten the Vikings by the end of the first half. And so they kind of just shut their offense down a little bit. And that obviously hinders somebody like Smith-Njigba. But not every game is going to be like that. So this week it might be a much more competitive game, and they're going to need to see Jackson Smith-Njigba out more, and he'll rack up several catches and several yards. Now, like I said, he only had 23 yards, but he already holds the record. He got the record last week with still 6 games to go for them, 5 or 6. He now has 1,336 yards, which is first all-time for the Seattle Seahawks in receiving yards in a season. Pretty impressive. That's all the players we've got. Let's move on to the AFC standings. We want to take a look at that because these are interesting. Right now, there was a huge shakeup last week when the Jaguars won, the Colts lost. Now they're both 8-4. The Jaguars moved from a wild card team into the playoffs. They're now the 3rd spot in the playoffs. The New England Patriots are first at 11-2. Denver Broncos are second at 10-2. But the Patriots have a bye week this week. So if the Denver Broncos win, they'll also go to 11-2. But due to different playoff scenario things, Denver Broncos will move into first. They'll be the number 1 team in the AFC. Also interesting is, like I said, the Jaguars moved from a wild card team into 3rd spot in the playoffs and would win their division if the season was over now, but it's not. The Jaguars and the Colts played. Colts now dropped to 6th spot as a wild card team. They're both 8-4. This game has a huge potential no matter which way you want to look at it, because the Los Angeles Chargers and the Buffalo Bills are also 8-4. So the scenario is like this. If the Chargers win and the Bills win and the Houston Texans, who right now are 8th, win, all 3 of them win, and the Jaguars lose, or the Colts lose, whichever one loses, if the Chargers, Bills, and Houston Texans win, the Jaguars or the Colts loser will fall out of the playoffs. That's how close this is right now. You've got so many teams at 8-4, but the Jaguars and the Colts, one of them is going to drop to 8-5, which will be the same record as the Houston Texans have if they win. Houston Texans have to win. Now, they got a tough game. They're playing Kansas City, so that's no gimme right there. But they just beat the Colts, And so it's really tight, really interesting to see how this is falling into place here. But right now, the New England Patriots and Denver Broncos are almost to the point, with probably one more win, of clinching a playoff spot, period. Whether they would lose every game after that or not. Probably 2 games. So, but they have a good shot at, both of them, of making the playoffs, only having to win like 2 out of 5 games. Whereas these other teams, like the Jaguars and the rest of them, pretty much have to win more than they lose. I think if Jaguars go 3-2, or any one of these 8-4 teams go 3-2, they'll be at 11-6. Probably they'll make a playoff spot, whether as a wild card team or division winner. Another interesting thing is when you went into the beginning of the season, the AFC South was one of the worst. And I, along with pretty much everybody who was looking at it, predicted one team, which would be the division winner, would come out of the AFC South to be in the playoffs. Well, it's not necessarily the case. You got the Jaguars, the Colts, and the Houston Texans are in 8th spot at 7-5. If they win and the Chargers and the Bills lose, it could be very possible that the Jaguars, the Colts, and the Texans are all in the playoffs if the season was end after this coming week. 3 teams from the AFC South. That's amazing. I would have never thought that could be possible. Now, on the other hand, with the division with the Baltimore Ravens, the Pittsburgh Steelers, and the Cincinnati Bengals, one team's going to come out of that, and that's it. I mean, unless 2 of them, well, they can't all win out. Baltimore Ravens are in the playoffs as the division winner at 6-6, but the Pittsburgh Steelers are also 6-6. They're 9th spot in the playoff scenario, and the Cincinnati Bengals are 12th at 4-8. Now, the Bengals pretty much have to win out. They got to beat every time they play the Ravens or the Steelers, and they've got to win every game. But with Burrow back, they just beat Baltimore, so now they're 2 games back. So what they're really looking at is a possibility. This is a division where possibly a team could win the division at 8-9 with a losing record and still win the division. So we'll see how it goes. But Pittsburgh Steelers started off like they had this division wrapped up, but since then they've lost like 4 out of 5 or something like that. I mean, they're just dropping off the map, and it's made it close, whereas the Baltimore Ravens have been winning, but they don't look impressive either. So the Cincinnati Bengals have been just kind of hanging around. So this week will be we'll see a lot more clarity after this week on how that looks. So that's a look at the AFC. Man, there's just some very interesting games going to happen this week. It's exciting to see. All right, let's take a look at the NFC. Now, the Los Angeles Rams, by losing to the Carolina Panthers at the same time that the Chicago Bears were winning, flip-flop now. The Chicago Bears are now the number 1 seed in the NFC. Who would have thought that? I don't think anybody. The Rams are second. They're both 9-3. By the way, the best teams in the NFL are in the AFC, which is another interesting stat, with 2 teams with only 2 losses. They're the only teams with 2 losses now after the Rams lost. I mean, I still really think of the Rams as one of the best teams. And I do believe if they played the Chicago Bears tomorrow, they'd stomp them. But that's just my theory on it. Whether it's actually true or not, I don't know. But so you have the Chicago Bears in first spot in the NFC, the Rams second, Eagles dropped down to third with that loss to the Bears. Tampa Bay Buccaneers got back on the winning side with a 7-5. Now they are 7-5. And Carolina Panthers are right behind them with 7-6. The Seattle Seahawks are 9-3. Now, on the other hand, this division, the wild card teams have some pretty good records. Seattle Seahawks are 9-3. Green Bay Packers are 8-3-1. And the 49ers are 9-4. Now, this is another division where, even though the Chicago Bears are in first place in the NFC as far as playoff scenario goes, and they're winning their division, they're 9-3. If they lose their game and the Green Bay Packers win, the Green Bay Packers are in first and probably jump up to first in the NFC because they only have 3 losses. And the Rams would probably go back to first and the Green Bay Packers would be second. Just really that's how close it is. Now, the Philadelphia Eagles they're fine in their division. No one else is really too competitive against them right now. Let me look at that. And let's look at that real quick. Before I say something that's not right. Well, the Philadelphia Eagles, only team they're worrying about is Dallas Cowboys, who right now are the 9th seed. Dallas Cowboys pretty much have to win quite a bit. They're 6-5-1. And when you've got teams in the playoffs already with 8 or 9 wins as wild cards, that makes it tough. In fact, Philadelphia with 8 wins is easier to do, possibly to win the division, than to even make it as a wild card. So Dallas Cowboys just keep winning, and they've got some opportunities because, with these last 5 weeks for everybody, so many division games where it's going to make a huge difference as they play each other. Now, what's good for back to the AFC for the Jaguars is they play the Tennessee Titans twice, which they just beat them. They play them again. They play the Jets, and they play the Colts twice. So that really is going to decide it. They beat the Colts this time, this week, and the same goes for the Colts. Whoever wins that game has a decided advantage over the other team. So it's going to be very close as far as that goes. So right now, the reason the Chicago Bears are in first is in a tiebreaker. They have a better record against NFC teams. The Bears are 6-2, while the Rams are 4-3. So we have a huge game coming up for 2 teams in this division, and that is the Chicago Bears and the Detroit Lions. Detroit Lions are 8th seed. Dallas Cowboys are 9th seed. I think I said that right. Dallas Cowboys and the Detroit Lions play on Thursday night. So whoever loses that game, their season's basically over, while the other team remains in contention. For the Detroit Lions, it's very close because they're 7-5. They go to 8-5. They'll still be a game behind or a half game behind Green Bay Packers or a game behind Chicago Bears. But being that they'll see each other again, there's a chance they can pull that off. All right. That is a look at the playoff races in the AFC and the NFC. Really some key situations happening there. So let's take a quick look at the standings right now, and then we'll call it a wraps. So in the AFC, New England Patriots just crushing in this division, the AFC East. New England Patriots are 11-2. They have a bye week. Buffalo Bills are 8-4, so they'll play a game. They could go to 9-4. They'd still be 2 games back with 4 games to go. And then you have the Miami Dolphins, who just have to basically win out and go 10-7. They're 5-7 right now to even have a shot at a wild card spot. And then the New York Giants are 3-9. In the AFC North, you got the Ravens, the Steelers, both at 6-6. The Ravens are in first. Cincinnati Bengals are 4-8. And then the Cleveland Browns are 3-9. So every game played among those 3 teams are going to, you could see a switch as the Ravens and the Steelers win or lose. If one wins and one loses type situation. Same goes for the AFC South. The Jaguars and the Colts are both 8-4. They play this Sunday. Winner of that game will be in a commanding position. The Houston Texans are 7-5. If they win, they'll be tied for second with whoever loses between the Jaguars and the Colts. So you'll have three teams. Well, we'll have one at 9-4, two at 8-5. That is if the Houston Texans win. And then the Tennessee Titans are eliminated already from playoffs. They're 1-11. AFC West, again, you have the Denver Broncos at 10-2. Los Angeles Chargers are 8-4. The Kansas City Chiefs are 6-6. And the Raiders are eliminated from playoffs at 2-10. Kansas City Chiefs are 4 games behind the Broncos with 5 games to go. And they're 2 games behind the Chargers for second spot. The best the Chiefs are really hoping for is to make it into the playoffs. But as long as the Chargers win, keep winning, and the Bills win, it's going to make it hard. And the Houston Texans, if any of those teams above the Chiefs keep winning, because they all have 7 or 8 wins, and they have advantage over the Chiefs right now as far as division tiebreaker type situation. So Kansas City Chiefs are looking at not even making the playoffs this year. Now in the NFC, Philadelphia Eagles, 8-4. They had this division wrapped up, and they've slowly let the Dallas Cowboys get closer. The Eagles are 8-4. Dallas Cowboys are 6-5-1. Commanders are 3-9, and the New York Giants are eliminated. They're at 2-11. Now, Dallas Cowboys are a game and a half back, and so they have a chance. In the NFC North, Chicago Bears 9-3. Green Bay Packers 8-3-1. Detroit Lions 7-5, and the Minnesota Vikings 4-8. So there you have a very close division between those 3 teams. The Bears, like I said, number 1 in the NFC, actually. Now, very close as well in the NFC South, Tampa Bay Buccaneers at 7-5. Carolina Panthers are 7-6. And the Falcons are 4-8. New Orleans Saints are 2-10. So Panthers are just a half a game behind the Tampa Bay Buccaneers. And if the Buccaneers lose, Panthers on a bye week, if the Buccaneers lose, they'll both be at 7-6. And I don't know about the tiebreakers there, which one. In the conference, they're both 5-3. So I don't know at this point who would stay. If the Buccaneers would stay in first or the Panthers would jump into first. We'll have to see. Like I said, I would have never guessed the Panthers even being in playoff contention. Atlanta Falcons 4-8. New Orleans Saints, they're eliminated at 2-10. And then the last division, NFC West, here's a huge, tightly contested division. Rams at 9-3. Seattle Seahawks 9-3. San Francisco 49ers 9-4. They have a bye week. So if either one of those teams lose, if they both lost, then the 49ers probably would move into first because they're 4-1 in the division. They have the best division record. Let me see who. Yeah, well, Seattle plays at Atlanta. They should win that game, even though it is in Atlanta. So it could be a tough game. And then the Eagles go to Los Angeles on Monday night. That's going to be a huge game. That'll be a great Monday night game. So we'll see what happens in the standings there. But these divisions are getting close. All right, that's a wrap. A lot of information there, a lot of fun things to look at. Can't wait to see what happens after these games that come up starting tomorrow night with the big game between Dallas and Detroit. Both of those teams have to win to continue to try to make it into the playoffs. All right, please like and subscribe to this podcast. You'll find it at Just the Stats NFL on YouTube. You can watch the video there, see the slides of all these numbers and standings, the playoff scenarios, the season stats that I mentioned for different players. And you can also listen to it on YouTube or Apple, Spotify, whatever app you might use to listen to podcasts. You can also always contact me at justthestatsnfl@gmail.com. Appreciate, again, you listening. Please like and subscribe, as I always say. Thank you for the comments, those who have written them. And that is a wrap for this episode of Top 10's for Wednesday, So until next time, which is tomorrow, we'll talk to you later.